Taylor Swift was heading to rehearsal when she noticed something unexpected. A venue security guard trying to hide his tears. And what happened next will leave you in tears. He was the kind of man you wouldn't notice in a crowd. Dressed in a blue uniform, standing tall near the exits, his job was to blend into the background. Most people walked past him without even glancing his way. That was how it was supposed to be. A security guard was there to protect, not to be seen. To most, he was just another face. But behind those tired eyes, behind that firm posture, was a life full of pain he had carried for years. His name was Frank. On the surface, Frank had always been known as a man of discipline. He never missed a day of work, never allowed personal matters to interfere with his duties. Rain or shine, sick or well, he showed up. The other guards admired him, some even envied his resilience. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was how heavy the burden he carried truly was. Years earlier, Frank's world had collapsed in a single cruel moment. His wife, the woman he had promised to grow old with, had fallen ill. At first, it was just fatigue. Nothing that couldn't be fixed with rest. But as months passed, her condition worsened. Hospitals, tests, endless bills. Frank fought through them all, refusing to believe that life could be so merciless. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, the inevitable came. One morning, she was gone, leaving Frank alone to raise their little girl. From that day on, Frank was not just a father. He became mother, protector, and provider. Every single decision revolved around his daughter. Her smile was the only reason he got out of bed. Her laughter was the only thing that made the long shifts bearable. In her, he saw fragments of his wife. The way she tilted her head when she was curious. The way she hummed little songs under her breath when she was happy. But raising a child alone wasn't easy. Bills piled up faster than paychecks. He picked up extra shifts, sometimes working late into the night, only to wake up before dawn. He learned to live with exhaustion, to accept the ache in his back and the weight in his chest as constant companions. Friends drifted away, too busy with their own lives to check in. Family offered sympathy, but little else. Frank learned not to ask for help. He carried everything in silence. And yet, he never once complained. Because to him, his daughter deserved the world. He would sacrifice everything. His health, his time, his dreams, if it meant she could grow up, knowing she was loved. But the years of sacrifice left scars. To the world, Frank was strong. To his daughter, he was a hero. But deep inside, he was just a man. Fragile, hurting, holding on by the thinnest of threads. And it was in that fragile moment, in the middle of another long day at the venue, that Taylor Swift noticed something no one else ever had. The crack in his armor. Frank's daughter, Lily, was the kind of child who could brighten any room. She had her mother's gentle eyes, her smile, and a heart so full of life that even strangers couldn't help but notice. For Frank, she was more than a daughter. She was the last living piece of the woman he loved. The only reminder of the family they once dreamed of building together. From the moment Lily was old enough to understand the world, she found magic in music. It was always playing in their small apartment, sometimes from an old radio Frank kept on the kitchen counter, sometimes from the little second-hand phone he bought her when she was 9. But more often than not, it was Taylor Swift's voice that filled their home. Lily would sit cross-legged on her bed, headphones too big for her tiny face, mouthing every lyric as if each word was written for her. Her notebooks were filled with scribbles, her own poems, and fragments of Taylor's songs, surrounded by hearts and doodles. But as Lily grew, something else began to grow inside her too. Something far darker. It started with fatigue. She would come home from school, drop her backpack, and collapse onto the couch, too tired to play or laugh. Frank thought it was just school catching up with her, maybe not enough sleep. But then came the bruises, the weight loss, the fevers that wouldn't break. Doctors, tests, endless waiting rooms. And then, the words no parent should ever hear. Cancer. Frank remembered sitting in that sterile hospital office, the world spinning, as the doctor explained treatment plans, survival rates, and costs. The sound of his own heartbeat thundered in his ears. He wanted to scream. to bargain, to take her pain onto himself. But he didn't. He just nodded, holding Lily's hand, promising her they'd fight together. From that moment, their lives became a cycle of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and quiet nights filled with whispered prayers. Lily's hair began to fall out. She grew weaker. Yet through it all, she held on to one thing that gave her strength: Taylor's music. She would lie in her hospital bed, IV tubes attached to her tiny arm, and still manage to smile when a Taylor song came on. And she had one dream: to see Taylor just once, even from far away. But she couldn't. The illness kept her confined to hospital rooms and occasional days at home. Her body was too fragile for the noise, the crowds, the long hours of a concert. Every time Taylor's tour came through the city, Lily's face would light up with hope, and then dim with disappointment when Frank explained that it just wasn't possible. For a father, there is no pain greater than watching your child's dream slip through their fingers, knowing there's nothing you can do to change it. Frank carried that guilt like a weight on his chest. He told himself he was doing everything he could, working extra hours, paying medical bills, making sure she had the best care. But in her eyes, he saw the longing he couldn't fulfill. And so, that day at the rehearsal, when Frank stood in the corner and saw Taylor walk by, all of it came crashing down. The sight of her, so close, just steps away, broke him. Not because he wanted to meet her himself, but because he knew how much his daughter would have given to trade places with him in that moment. For her, it would have been a miracle. For him, it was a cruel reminder of the life she was missing. That was why Frank cried. Not for himself, but for the little girl who should have been there, whose laughter should have echoed in that stadium, but instead lay in a hospital bed, miles away. After rehearsal, the crew slowly dispersed. The arena emptied, the echo of instruments and voices fading into silence. Taylor was walking toward the exit, chatting quietly with a stage manager, when she noticed him. Standing alone in the corner, shoulders heavy, his eyes glistened with the kind of tears a man tries and fails to hide. Something about the way he quickly looked away when their eyes met told her it wasn't nothing. Most people would have walked past, respecting his space. But Taylor wasn't most people. She slowed, then stopped, her instincts pulling her back toward him. "Hey," she said softly, almost cautiously, as if afraid to intrude. "Are you okay?" Frank straightened instantly, forcing himself into the professional stance he had practiced for years. "I'm fine, ma'am," he almost said, the words sitting on his tongue. But when he looked at her, he saw someone genuinely concerned, someone who noticed what no one else had. His lips trembled. I'm sorry. It's nothing." Taylor shook her head. "Don't apologize." Her voice was calm, steady, but filled with a warmth that disarmed him. "You don't have to tell me. But if you want to, I'm here." And that was it. The walls Frank had built, the years of silence he had carried, finally cracked. His chest heaved as he tried to speak, words spilling out between shaky breaths. He told her about Lily, her endless love for Taylor's music, her notebooks filled with lyrics, and the posters above her hospital bed. He told her about the cancer. By the time he finished, his voice had broken completely. He lowered his head, ashamed of his tears. But when he dared glance up, he saw Taylor standing frozen, her eyes glistening. She pressed a hand to her mouth, struggling to keep her composure. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The stadium, once so loud, was now silent enough to hear the hum of the lights above. Then Taylor stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, she wrapped her arms around him. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. When she pulled back, Taylor wiped at her eyes quickly. "Your daughter, what's her name?" "Lily," he said, his voice cracking. Taylor nodded, as if committing it to memory. "I want to do something for her." And she did. That very evening, after leaving rehearsal, Taylor arranged a package to be delivered directly to Lily's hospital room. Inside was a signed guitar, with the words, "For Lily, keep fighting. With love, Taylor Swift." There was also a handwritten letter, filled with words only Taylor could have written. She told Lily she was proud of her strength, that her music was for people like her. That one day, she hoped they could meet. But Taylor didn't stop there. Quietly, without making a spectacle, she spoke to her team and ensured that financial help was provided for Lily's treatment. Frank never asked for it. He never would have. But Taylor gave anyway, because she couldn't imagine walking away knowing she had the means to help. The next morning, in a sterile white hospital room, Lily received the package. Nurses gathered around as she opened it, her tiny hands trembling with excitement. When she saw the guitar, she gasped, her face lighting up in a way the hospital staff hadn't seen in months. But when she opened the letter and realized it was written just for her, tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered, "Daddy, she knows my name." Frank stood by her bed, holding her fragile hand, his own tears unstoppable. For the first time in years, he saw something in his daughter's eyes he thought he had lost forever. And in that moment, he understood that Taylor hadn't just given Lily a gift, she had given them both the strength to keep going. A reminder that even in the darkest corners, a single act of kindness can light the way forward.